On the 29th of December 1888, the body of John Gill was discovered in a barn near Manningham Lane in Bradford. John was only 7 years old. His brutal and disturbing murder shocked Victorian Britain to its core, because in 1888 another murderer by the name of Jack the Ripper had been terrorising London. The question was therefore asked, had Jack the Ripper come to the north of England to start a new reign of terror in Bradford? When you put the words Ripper and Bradford together, it's most likely you're going to think of the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, a story we've covered here 2 or 3 times on the channel. However, the events that we're talking about are linked to Jack the Ripper, who 100 years before Peter Sutcliffe was terrorising the Whitechapel area of London, murdering women as he went. There's a reason this is linked to Jack the Ripper, and that's because of what happened to the victim, the condition that the killer kind of left him in. And it is a really grisly story. It's not an easy one to tell, and it's not going to be an easy one to listen to, especially as it involves a 7-year-old boy. So that's the warning. I've put it up already. This one is not nice in any way, shape or form, and so please use your own discretion. If you think you're not going to like it, just stop now and click to the next one. In terms of Jack the Ripper though, it might be quite interesting to look at my friend's video on the channel by Daft Monkey. He makes a pretty good attempt at figuring out who Jack the Ripper is. You can look at that video right here, check that one out. But for now, we're going to head up Manningham Lane in Bradford, and we're going to look for some of the locations linked to this story. And it goes back, obviously, 130 years, and pretty much everywhere we're going today has now been cleared and is now something else. That's understandable. These were kind of slum houses at the time that were lived in, and they were cleared during the war, I think. Thankfully we have a map where we can find where some of them were, so let's see what we can find. So John Gill was 7 years old and lived here with his family on Thorncliffe Road, which runs down the bottom of the road here. And he lived at number 41 with his mum and his dad, and he had 3 older siblings. And he was a very, very popular and happy boy. Did well at school, was proceeding really well, and yeah, generally regarded as a nice kid. John also liked to be helpful, and so occasionally he would get up very early in the morning and go and help on the local milk cart. Did the rounds around this area by William Barrett, 23-year-old, who lived further down Thorncliffe Road. And he would help doing the milk, and eventually he would be brought back for his breakfast to his house on Thorncliffe. But on this particular day, 27th of December, he decided to jump off the cart a few streets early. John hopped off the cart here at a place called Warmer Villas. Nice. And he was last seen by the milkman. Remember, this was December, kind of skating on a little pool of ice, like you do as kids. And that was the last that John was ever seen alive. John didn't return for breakfast that morning as expected, and his mother got quite worried. So she went out searching and asking the neighbours if they had seen him. And of course some said yes, they'd seen him on the milk cart that morning with William, but nothing beyond when he was seen on this street here. So they started to put out signs about a lost boy. They also found it very strange that John had never ever jumped off the milk cart early before, always having William return him to the house. 2 days passed and it seemed that William had quite literally disappeared until the morning of 29th of December 1888, when a stable boy turned up at the stables to do his work for that morning. Just here, this was Back Mellor Place, and this is where the stables were, and this is where the stable boy made a rather horrifying discovery. The stable boy was 18-year-old Joseph Buck, and he began the day by clearing out the manure in the stable. He suddenly noticed what looked like a pile of clothes. Lifting the clothes, he spotted a human leg, a severed ear, and then the torso of a child's body, mutilated. The stable boy ran for help, and crowds started to gather at the scene, as did the police. The body was examined and photographed by a police surgeon. The boy's legs had been severed. His ears had been sliced off, and the rest of his face was untouched. A deep cut ran from his chin to his abdomen. 2 stab wounds were in his chest. His intestines and heart had been removed and placed around his neck, and his genitals had been cut off. However, there was no blood at the scene. This was a sign to the police that John had died elsewhere, and his body placed there, somewhere between 4:30 and 7:30 a.m. that morning, the only time the stables had been empty. News soon spread, and it wasn't long before John's parents had heard about their child's fate. And sadly, a post-mortem revealed an even worse fate for John. His lung, which was initially thought to be missing, had been stuffed into his stomach. The boy had suffered severe fright before death, likely the death coming by the stabbing in his chest. There was a bloody gag found at the scene, likely to have covered his mouth to stifle his screams. His clothes were intact and therefore must have been removed before the attack, and it was decided he had likely been sexually assaulted. His body had been washed inside and out and completely drained of all blood. Some say the brutality of John's death surpasses anything that had happened in London. But the immediate thoughts were, was this the work of Jack the Ripper? People at the scene were screaming Jack the Ripper's name on the street. But despite the attention immediately focused on this being a Ripper attack, the police decided this is what the actual killer wanted people to think, and that the killer was actually in their midst. The next day, the final person who had seen John alive, William Barrett the milkman, was arrested. So now we're on Bateman Street. Again, no houses here. And this is where William Barrett was arrested. And when they searched his property, they found that there was a particular knife amongst Barrett's property that fit the wounds on John's body, a specific knife, not just like a normal knife. And they also found that there was some dark red stains on that knife, even though the knife looked like it had been cleaned. They also went to check on his stables where he kept his horse and cart, and found that the stables had been completely washed clean with water. So the finger of blame, in terms of the police, were immediately pointed at Barrett. Barrett was taken into custody and charged with murder. He was kept in cells under the town hall until his date in front of the magistrates. Whilst in the dock, he would lean with his head on the metal bars, keeping his hands in his pocket, seemingly nonplussed about the whole thing. Didn't seem upset about the loss of his little friend, or the grisly fate that had befallen him. Interestingly, when I was talking about the slum clearance, it seems that a lot of the buildings are now part of Valley Parade's Bradford football ground stadium. For this video, we're not going to go in depth into what happened in court, but instead I'll mention a few pieces of evidence that were brought up for the prosecution. Firstly, Eliza Kendall worked at Bellevue as a matron, which backed onto the stables where the milk cart was kept, and she awoke on the Friday night to a light on in the stables, and there were some unusual noises that frightened her. She thought someone was breaking into the house, a kind of scraping and swilling noise. She heard the stable door close and steps heading down Bellevue to Manningham. Other witnesses also recalled lights in the stable at the dead of night. Another claimed at 6:15 on the Saturday, a man was seen walking down Thorncliffe Road carrying a package that looked like a pile of clothes. This woman had never seen Barrett in the courtroom at all, but her description of him fitted perfectly. The police suggested that those clothes were John's clothes, and it confirmed their suspicion that John had been murdered and moved elsewhere, and the location of that murder, which had been cleaned down, the stables of William Barrett, perhaps. And a man claimed that they had specifically seen William carrying a heavy parcel. He tried to speak to him, but Barrett kept his head down and ignored him. Despite all this, there was no hard evidence to suggest William Barrett had killed John Gill, and he was released, much to the delight of an audience who had come to support him. He went to a place called Cononley, where his wife had gone whilst he was in jail, and he received a hero's welcome, a band playing "See the Conquering Hero Come." Most suggested there that the police should never have arrested Barrett on the evidence they had, and the priest of the village said he had absolutely no doubt that Barrett was innocent. But where does that leave poor John Gill? So this is Windhill Cemetery in Shipley. It's not badly kept at all, really. However, most of the gravestones do seem to be lying down. I know that John is buried here, and I do know that his headstone is also laying down, so we'll have a search. Hopefully we can find it. So we do have quite a lot to check. I've looked all that side and nothing. They also seem to be in the wrong century, so let's have a look at this side. Okay, I think this might be it. Here he is. So, as expected, this stone is laid down and is fast disappearing. What's written on it is quite interesting and certainly matches in with the story so far. So what it says is, John Gill, beloved son of Thomas and Mary Ann Gill of Thorncliffe Road, Manningham, who was found dead December 29th, 1888, having met his death at the hand of one who will someday seek repentance in his 8th year. Suffer little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And also buried here, Thomas, his father, died 1909, and his mother, Mary, 1932. Apologies if the image isn't coming through very clear, it's quite a worn gravestone. There were never any other arrests or even suspects in the murder of John Gill, and as suggested, the police certainly never thought that this was a Jack the Ripper case, and so those lines of investigation were never followed either. So it is fitting that the only person in the end who knows who committed the murder will be long gone. This is 130 years ago, and yeah, you can only imagine the rest of the lives for that poor family, the Gill family, both mother, father and children. A year after John's death, a local vicar received a letter, an anonymous letter, suggesting 5 boys had murdered John, but nothing further was ever followed up on. When John's body was discovered, some of him was wrapped in newspaper with a written name, W. Mason, Derby Road, Liverpool. Mason was never traced. So in 2024, the murder remains unsolved and is likely now to remain that way. But who do you think may have been responsible for what was regarded as one of the worst murders in Victorian England? Could it have been Jack the Ripper? Could it have been the milkman? Or is there something we're missing here? Rest in peace to John. We'll see you for the next video very soon. Take care. Bye.